The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for Keefer and Kurre and Tony Kurre. I am fired up. I am a lit fuse. I sat here on Saturday night after sitting here on Saturday afternoon in my glorious home theater watching two of the marquee college football games this season. And by the middle of the third quarter of the night game, I had had enough. I had reached the breaking point. I had to go and double down on my blood pressure medicine. I had to do deep breathing exercises. My temples were throbbing. I could barely feel my arms. Tony, I was incensed during the Texas and Georgia game after being basically primed to explode. I was like a rocket ship. I was fueled during the Alabama-Tennessee game, and I blasted off during Georgia-Texas, and it's something I want to talk about today.
Let's get into it, man. And you weren't the only one. It is something that everyone's talking about, and they will be talking about for the next few days. The SEC, of course, has already come out and given their details of what happened. I know you're talking about the Georgia-Texas game, but why are you so angry, my friend?
Well, let's just preface it this way. We do a show on Jocks 94.5 in Birmingham on Saturday mornings. Terry Quillian and I, who have been doing football programming for the last 8 years, have a show on Saturday morning called Kip and Terry Game Time. And we wax poetic and talk to callers and experts around the country for these two premier games last Saturday, Tennessee and Alabama in Knoxville, Georgia going to number one Texas. Georgia, Texas, and Alabama all have occupied the number one spot this year. So these were massive matchups. Tennessee is kind of the bell at the ball. They started around the bottom of the top 10 or just outside and was spectacular early in the year. So Alabama at Tennessee and Georgia at Texas were these great matchups, and we hyped the hell out of it. We had experts. We had all kinds of great discussion. But then it hit me, and I brought something up in the last 10 minutes of that program that was amazingly prophetic, as it turned out. And I know for a fact that of the hundreds of preview shows and talking heads, including College Game Day with the celebrated cast of superstars they have, all five, by the way, who picked Texas to beat Georgia, and Reese Davis, the host, who's not even supposed to have an opinion, said something about, I feel sorry for Georgia. I think they're just running into a meat grinder here or something to that effect. So they all made asses of themselves. Let's call it what it is.
Yes.
Because not to think Georgia had any chance was nonsensical. If you look at who Texas has played, they haven't played a single team that has any offense whatsoever. Anyway, I said all that on our show on the starting lineup, but that's not where my prophecy came, because I had no idea how either one of those games was going to go. When you have matchups of good teams, it just depends on a lot of factors, and it is the matchups individually as much as the whole team that makes the difference. What I was prophetic about, Tony, was Terry, I have one thought. And she said, what's that? And I said, I just hope, with all of the spotlight and this being such a magnificent giant stage to showcase the new SEC and the powerhouse it's become and its fabulous teams, I'm just hoping that third team on the field the guys running around with the stripes, the house framers, the plumbers, the principals, the accountants, the whatever else what is their weekly gig on the weekend, they become these power broker arbiters on the field, running around with a rag in their back pocket and throwing it on the ground repeatedly. I said on that show, and I've got the tape to prove it, I said, I hope that these guys don't take it upon themselves to be the third team on the field and have just as much say in the outcome of the games, or even more so than the players, because I think that's the trend, particularly in the SEC, which is by far the best conference in the country quality-wise, but by far has the absolute worst officials, because I think most of these guys, they are getting these weekend gigs. They're amateurs. They're not professional officials. I'm sure they go through a lot of training and rigors to at least create the appearance that they are. But it's not even the officials I blame, Tony. Ultimately, I blame the Southeastern Conference for sitting on millions of dollars that they're collecting from TV revenues and all the other sources, and not making the investment in hiring professionals to be on the field, and taking these amateurs, knowing that they can't manipulate professional officials to change who they are, because those guys are expert on the rules, but they can manipulate these amateurs into points of emphasis. That's my favorite 3 words in the whole English language when it comes to football and officiating, because each week you can tell by the flags and what they're calling what they've been mandated by the league office to look out for. Officiating, Tony, is not a science where you are looking for lawbreakers. It is what you observe and what you spontaneously call. It is not a pre-conditioned assignment, and that is what the SEC League office has been doing for a long time, and it really is a big concern of mine, and I expressed that, and Terry and I got into that discussion about how awful is it going to be if these guys just use this as a showcase to call attention to themselves, and that the one of these or both of these games get highly affected by these guys infusing themselves into every single play. And that's exactly what happened in the Alabama game. And then what happened in the Texas-Georgia game was just beyond belief.
26 penalties, 210 yards in the Tennessee-Alabama game. And that's not really surprising, because Alabama's had a problem with the yellow flag all year long. Yeah. So that doesn't really. And 15 penalties, 119 yards in the Georgia-Texas game. I feel your pain. I feel your heat. I feel what you're saying. The biggest question I have, and I've looked at the tape, I've gone back, 2 things. First of all, did fan behavior more than likely influence the refs? And I think
absolutely.
It absolutely did. And it takes me back to like 2021, I think it was, when Tennessee played Ole Miss, and I think up at Neyland Stadium, when they threw all kinds of crap on the field, and
mustard yards, batteries, golf balls.
Got $250,000 fined for it. And I think that game lasted like an extra half an hour because of that. Now, they pulled this back a lot earlier. By the way, we're doing this show on October 21st. I don't know if you saw what the Lynx coach said this morning. She said, this shit was stolen from us. When the Liberty took the WNBA last night, she was hauling off on the refs.
I have not seen
it. I mean, the refs are catching it in all sports right now. When, of course, there was Cheryl Reeves, the coach for the Lynx. Ariana Smith was actually called with a foul, 5.2 seconds left. And, of course, they went down and tied the ball game to go overtime so the Liberty could win their first championship. Let's go back to the SEC. So, I mean, the refs are on everything, on almost every single sport.
So I'm already absolutely incensed.
Well, real quick, first questions. Were they influenced? And if they were, by throwing stuff in the field, it worked. And the second question I will ask is were they trying to do something for one team as opposed to the other? And I guess my third point is, did they get it right? My thing is, you'll hear these talking heads, well, at least they got it right. It doesn't matter how you get it. You got it right. And Kip, they got it right. They got it right. Arian Smith made contact first. Now, and I hear you, and I love you, and I'd love to be on your side. But they got the call right. Now, had they not thrown stuff on the field, they probably wouldn't have had a chance to go back and look at it. And I didn't see, I kept trying to find out how soon, it's very pivotal, how soon they picked that flag up. Did they pick that flag up before stuff started coming onto the field? Because if they did, they were going to discuss it anyway.
No, but the call had already been made, Tony. They didn't pick the flag up.
Exactly. So the play was called, but because they had that time, how often do we see teams call timeout so refs can look at plays? The team runs up,
which is ridiculous too, but that's different. That is a video review tactic. This was not a video review. This play was not reviewable.
That's true.
The call on the field was the call on the field. The referee stepped up, turned his microphone on, pass interference, number 7 defense, automatic first down. The ball is supposed to be spotted. The play clock is supposed to start. There is not a delay. There's never conference. After the call is made, the ball is spotted. The only reason that all of those things didn't kick in is because the fans started showering the field with debris. This was not a reviewable call. That's by their own rules in the SEC. Pass interference now in the NFL could be appealed. That's not the case in college football. And we can debate whether the call was right or not. That's not pertinent here. A call was made by the official that is supposed to make the call, the one that's 5 feet away. My outrage doesn't come from any loyalty to either team. I just don't like the precedent that it has established where the fans can misbehave and go into this raucous, riotous fit, pelting the field, and it's very dangerous. I don't know if you remember in that Tennessee melee a couple of years ago, Cole Kublik, who was talking to Lane Kiffin, was actually hit by a golf ball thrown from the stands. And a cheerleader was injured when somebody threw a full can of some kind of soda or something and injured her knee.
Jay Barker talks about getting hit with bottles of whiskey at Tennessee. Yeah.
I believe it. So what you have done is create a mandate that, okay, if you don't like a call, react violently, because then maybe they'll have time to confer and change their mind. But here's the more insidious thing that I'm saying today, Tony, in that situation. First of all, yes, Arian Smith was trying to run his route, but if the Texas defensive back is holding his position and there's incidental contact there, Arian Smith was certainly not running at him to try and prevent him from making an interception. The ball had just been thrown. He was trying to make his cut to the outside, and that guy went with him, and they collided. Arian Smith was not intentionally trying to make contact there. 98% of the time with the ball in the air, if there's contact, the foul has to be called, and 98% of the time it's defensive interference. And that's what the mindless official called. Whether that was right or wrong, I can't tell you, but he obviously didn't interfere too effectively. The Texas guy stepped in and made the play and took it to the 9-yard line. So if he interfered, the play was still an interception. So I have a hard time saying that was, quote, the right call, but I won't totally refute it. But what was wrong was that guy ran in, gave the referee the information. It's defensive pass interference. The announcement was made. The ball should have been spotted. And because the fans rioted, it gave time for the chain reaction. How many times do you see officials in football convene after the call is made and the ball is spotted? They only had time to do that because of the delay caused by the fans. And I think it's a more nefarious reason, Tony. I think back here in Birmingham at the SEC office, by the lame explanations that they're coming out with, I smell, and I just spent an hour on Need to Know talking about government and misbehavior and cover-ups. I smell a rat, Tony, in Birmingham, where this is the most visible game of the year in the SEC. They're freaking out in the Birmingham office that, Texas is getting blown out here. They make a huge play. They run the ball down where they can get right back in the game. We could have a cliffhanger, go to the wire. We've really botched a great opportunity here by this call, which they may have rightly perceived that was the wrong call. I maintain it should have been a no call because I think the contact was because both players cut in the same position and ran into each other. I don't think anybody intentionally interfered.
They both have a right to. They both have a right to the ball.
Absolutely,
you're right, and so there's going to be contact there. And normally we love it, particularly in basketball, when we said, "Wow, they're really letting them play." I love it when they let them play.
Yeah, they're players.
And you could call pass interference on almost every single call. And when they're grappling with their hands, as long as one guy's just not grabbing his face mask or pulling it down, it's just I have no problem with it. By the SEC came out this morning with 3:12 to play in the third quarter. This is what they said officially. Of the Georgia-Texas game, Texas intercepted a pass to the Texas 46-yard line, returned to the Texas 9-yard line. Texas was flagged for committing defensive pass interference in the play, which resulted in Georgia maintaining the ball with a first down. The game officials gathered to discuss the play, which is permitted to ensure the proper penalty is enforced, which time calling the official reported that they erred and a foul should not have been called for defensive pass interference. Consequently, Texas would award the ball at the Texas 9-yard line. We know they scored after that. When the original evaluation assessment of the penalty was not properly executed, it is unacceptable to have debris thrown on the field at any time. The disruption of the game due to debris being thrown onto the field will be reviewed by the conference official and the office related to SEC sportsmanship policies and procedures. They tried to switch us around and said, we screwed up, but it's all right, but you should have done this. And that's why we did what we did. And you're absolutely right. This is teaching us that we should throw shit on the field whenever we're not happy.
Yeah,
I've been in NASCAR. They do it in NASCAR too. I've been at Talladega where they showered the track with so much stuff it takes hours to clean it off. I've seen it happen before. If the refs are going to call that, but again, when you're talking about a game of this magnitude, when you're talking about two monster games and both of them in the SEC, let them play. Let them play. Yep. They're going to find out. They're going to know. We much rather would see a 30-15 game if there's 6 penalties than if there's 15. And sure as hell, I don't want to see 26 penalties in an Alabama-Tennessee game because it breaks the game up. I realize if you're doing things wrong, I realize we have to have penalties and we have to have things called. I get that. I totally agree with you that these SEC officials should get paid about $120,000 a piece. Now, I don't even know what accrue. I'm not sure which conference was calling either one of the games.
And they need to be professionals, I think not plumbers and high school principals.
I want to say it was the ACC calling the Georgia-Texas game, and I'm not sure what the other game was. The SEC obviously doesn't call its own games. But the idea that you're saying that you believe it came from the Birmingham office.
And let me explain that.
I want to hear more about this, Mr. Conspiracy Man.
Okay. So in a normal circumstance, that's not a reviewable play. So the guy at the field, the replay official has no voice in that play. He can't buzz down and go, hey, we need to take another look at that. It's not reviewable, Tony. The call on the field was not only made, and there could have been the whole backtrack to, well, they have every right to confer and make sure they got the call right. But that's before the penalty's announced. It's not afterwards. It's like I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like Congress passing a bill, and as soon as it's gavelled, okay, it's motion passes. It's like some of the opponents can start raising a big raucous, and next thing you know, there's a conference and going,
the death penalty's still on.
yeah, exactly.
You're still dying.
That's the best analogy I can come up with. But here's what I think, and maybe people call me a conspiracy theorist, but what I think happened, and what I'm pretty sure by these lame comments, is that once the penalty was announced and the opportunity to spot the ball and play on, which is the standard procedure, because the replay official has no voice. This is not a reviewable. I've heard people who are confused already saying, well, the call was reviewed. No, it was not reviewed. They
reviewed it, but it was not a reviewable play. You're right. They had plenty of time to look up and see what happened. And every time they kept playing because they played the replay like 55 times, which they normally don't do in a lot of stadiums. I'm happy they did it there. But when they did that, the fans were incensed. And every time they showed it again and again and again, more stuff was thrown on the field. And obviously, the refs saw that too.
It should have been a no call, and it was never officially classified as offensive interference either. Yep. But there's got to be an interference call on that play if the ball is in the air. If contact is made, somebody is responsible. If they'd switched it even to offensive interference, which would have been moot, because that would have, of course, been declined by Texas, and they get the ball there anyway. But that's not what they did. They said there's no defensive pass interference. Well, Tony, there was massive contact. Somebody interfered.
Somebody did.
And you have to make that call, and 99% of the time it goes against the defense, because Arian Smith was just running his route. He did not try to grab the guy or whatever, and the guy still made the interception. So obviously, if he was trying to interfere, he did a piss poor job of it. But here, let me get back to the question you just asked.
Yes,
I think that the showering of debris, the Kirk Herbstreit and Bill LeMunion, who's the ABC official, going, I think they got this wrong. I think people back in the SEC headquarters who are monitoring every second of every game are looking at each other and going, oh, this is a disaster. This was our marquee game.
By the way, because Texas was down 2 scores then, and of course they get the ball, they go down, they make it a 1-score game. So Georgia if Georgia scores there, the game is over. You're right.
Exactly. It was 23-8 at the time.
Yeah.
Georgia had completely dominated the game, and Texas. I am absolutely certain that in the SEC office they said we got to do something about this. This is a disaster. Everybody, every college, every fan, every sports fan's watching this game, and we just made a horrendous mistake. Even if they believe that. After the fact, I think they contacted the replay official who has the capability of buzzing the referee, and they can communicate. And while all that was going on, all of a sudden you saw all the other officials trotting over to the referee. Did they take that upon themselves to go, while we have this chance, let's convene a impromptu meeting? That is not what happened, Tony. The order came from this SEC office to say, you guys need to talk about that. We got the call wrong. We got to fix this, because not only is our marquee game a blowout, Georgia is kicking Texas's ass. This gets Texas back in the game, but the call we made prohibits that. And I hate to say it, but I think these offices have taken it upon themselves now, the administrations of these leagues, that this was bad for business. This was bad for their franchise, and their new crown jewel member, Texas, was being wronged by the new conference that they have joined, the SEC. I think for political reasons, for promotional reasons, I think the order came down from Birmingham. You guys talk about that and make sure that that's the right call. Maybe that was the directive, but this was not impromptu. Those guys didn't just gather, to have a chat about a call that had already been announced. The ball had already been spotted. I'm sorry. This stinks to high heaven. Something's not rotten in Denmark. Something's rotten in downtown Birmingham.
Well, first of all, I think you need to stop watching Ancient Aliens. I think you've gotten too much conspiracy in your brain. I do. And listen, I'm all about furthering stories and making things explode. First of all, you don't have your own conference refereeing your own games. I'm trying to find out who exactly the referees were.
You do.
Well,
it's an SEC. No, Tony, that's when they play a team from a different conference. An SEC game is 100% SEC officials.
Okay. All right. If that's the case, and Kirby Smart also came out late after the game and said that we are robbed. I mean, he said he didn't have to drop.
Don't you love Kirby though?
Yeah.
After he
wins by 15. Yeah.
He's characterized as the unfortunate call.
He said they tried to rob us in this place, and obviously it was in this place. I'm friends. I don't have dinner with, and I don't travel with. I don't go on vacation with, and I don't know his wife real well. But I'm friends with Steve Shaw. I know Steve. Who is director, I know you do, who is director of SEC officiating, was an SEC official himself for over 20 years. I've interviewed him 50 times. One of the classiest guys. I put him almost in Bart Starr land. That's how classy this guy is. And will answer almost every question. I'm sure his phone is blowing up. I actually saw Paul Feinbaum on Fox 6 earlier this morning. He came on right before I did and was actually talking about this particular call and thought it was a joke as well. I don't think Steve would be part of something like that, but you're calling out a conspiracy in that the SEC is trying to make this a closer game.
It may have been above Steve because, again, I think and let me say this about Steve Shaw. I have personal admiration for Steve. I interviewed him once right when they came up with the targeting rule idea. That was the very summer, right when they had come back from whatever meeting that put that into place. But I think they get so committed to things. I asked Steve the question that turned out to be very perceptive. I said, so you call targeting on the field as part of a personal foul. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me ask you the question. If you determine that it was not targeting, is it still a personal foul? And he says, yes, it's an improper hit. I said, well, it's not an improper hit if it's not your definition of targeting. That makes no sense. He says, well, you're not looking at the whole picture. If the hit is significant enough to warrant our review, the personal foul penalty is still going to stand, which to me, to this day, makes no sense. And later on in that same year, in a game against Vanderbilt, Georgia linebacker dislodged a guy from the ball, targeting was called. They came back and said no targeting, but the personal foul stood. Vanderbilt got a 15-yard penalty, and they kicked the winning field goal. So it came home to roost that very same season. So while I have all the confidence in the world in Steve's integrity, I think sometimes they get kind of stubborn in their own perception of things and won't listen to reason. But I think this was even higher up the chain of saying this is an embarrassment. If we cost Texas the opportunity to win this game when they've made the play to maybe turn the tide, I just think it stinks to high heaven.
I don't think it had anything to do with conspiracy. I don't think it had anything to do with anyone calling from any office. But I do think there's a conspiracy.
So you think? So I got to jump on you here.
Yep.
So you think these officials, took it upon themselves because they're being showered with debris? As well, maybe we need to look at this again. That's not how officiating works.
I think it only had to do with two things: the showering of debris, and obviously the fact they got a chance to see that play over and over and over again. As far as getting a phone call, I mean, this is not Bugs Bunny 1.5 hours of Bugs Bunny here. We're not talking about picking up phones and making phone calls.
It's a simple chain, Tony. The replay official is in contact with the control center at the SEC. That is, it's not somebody going out of their way.
If they wanted this game to be close, what I'm saying, Kip, is if they wanted this game, it was a 15-point game. It was a 15-point game, and it ended up a 15-point game. If they really wanted to make this game close, and they said from the get-go, then they would have met with those refs beforehand and said, listen, we want this game to be close, guys. So make sure you penalize, make sure you go. They're not going to wait till the middle of the third quarter with 3 minutes left. One team's up by 15 and go, you know what? I think now's the time to go ahead and give Texas a player. I don't believe it.
This properly. That wasn't a mandate. Nobody had that thought. Everybody on earth thought Texas was going to win the game. The problem I have with it, and the reason that I'm pointing the finger at the SEC directly, is because they didn't want their first really high-level marquee matchup between the existing best team in their league, Georgia, and their new crown jewel, Texas, to be marred by this controversy forevermore, that Texas didn't have a chance to win the game because the SEC officials screwed up and robbed.
From a larger conspiracy standpoint, I will agree with you. First of all, I think the crowd had everything to do with it. I think the refs saw it. I think they probably feared for their life. They already talking about bringing in like guardsmen and stuff for the end of that ball game because those refs were going to get killed. I get that. But it worked out well for the SEC that the lines and the scores ended up the way they did in order to get a maximum amount of teams in the 12-team playoff. Right now we got 4 teams in. Alabama's not in. A&M's actually higher than Alabama.
Absolutely.
Take a swallow on that one right now, Alabama fans. A&M's ranked higher than Alabama, which is unbelievable. But if Georgia loses that game, they're not done because they've lost to Texas and Alabama. They're not finished, and they certainly should be at the top 12 team. If Texas wins that ball game and Georgia's got 2, there is no wiggle room. There is no wiggle room. Now at least you have a little wiggle room because you got Texas with one loss. They lost to the number 1 team in the land. They're in. Georgia's got 1 loss. They're in. Alabama's got 2 losses. That Vanderbilt loss is going to be the thing that I think is going to put Alabama out. I don't think Alabama's going to make it at this point. I don't think you can put them in. If they run the table, maybe, but they have to run the table at this point. They have 1 more loss. They're definitely out. But that loss to Vanderbilt was a killer. I mean, it's who you lose. It's who you lose to. When you're a 26-point favorite, you can't lose a ball game. I go back a couple years ago when Ohio State lost to Iowa in that one game. They had 1 loss all year long, but they got beat somehow by 30 against Iowa, and people held that against them. He said, you can't lose to an Iowa and still make it to the playoffs. You're not doing that. They'll do that, and they're looking for every reason, other college football fans are, to keep Alabama out because they're in it every single year. Could you imagine? Think about this story, though. Bama makes it in almost every year. I'm not sure how many years they've missed. I think they've made it every year but 1. In the 4-team playoff, we go to a 12-team playoff, and Alabama doesn't make it in.
Oh,
do you know how flipping crazy that is? How crazy that is? Before we go, and I want to ask you this question. And I've heard legend on our show. By the way, he keeps calling Kalen DeBoer Kevin DeBoer. I think he's doing that on purpose. I
can tell you that's exactly what he's doing.
His head may explode this Saturday morning, although he did have Army, Navy, and of course, Georgia plus the points is his dog, so he goes 3-0. How much are you putting this? If Nick Saban is the head coach of Alabama, what's their record right now? It's 5. It's 5-2. Are they 7-0 or 6-1?
No. Well, I mean, the Tennessee game, that was ridiculous. A good Alabama team that's well coached would have been ahead 27-0 at halftime. Tennessee was just pitiful in the first half. That was the worst offensive performance. They kept trying to get the kid who's really not ready for prime time, despite all of the hype that he was going to be the next coming. Tennessee was totally ineffective. Their defense wasn't stopping Alabama. Alabama was making stupid mistakes and being hampered by the flags. Again, I'm not blaming the loss on the officials. I thought the officiating was horrible in that game on both sides, because once again, these guys had to infuse themselves into every single play. They're looking for violations. And you might say, well, that's what a referee supposed to do. No, that's not what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to watch the game, and if they see a foul, they call it. But they are being pressured once again by the SEC office to enforce these alleged player safety penalties where there's no interpretation. There's no difference in the SEC approach to a guy stopping and physically slugging a quarterback with all of his might in the side of the helmet and barely glancing him with his pinky finger. Yeah. There's no difference.
We have to bolt because we got so many people want to comment on this. info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Check us out with all of our email questions. I want to leave you with one final question, and then I want you to think about it, and we'll answer it next time we come on here. We have to give DeBoer, for people calling for his job, it's ridiculous. Obviously, that's not going to happen. I'm not saying that he should keep his job. I'm just saying that they're not going to do that. In 2 years, DeBoer, Freeze, Dilfer, will any of those three be at their schools in 2 years? By the way, Hugh Freeze, that's almost a fireable offense. He's 3-9 now in the SEC. He's 3-9. Listen, you could have a losing record, but you have to win at home, and you have to win in your conference. He's 3. He's eating 12 overall, and everyone keeps saying, well, wait, now he's got this their number one recruiting class next year. I tell you what, next year's it. If they don't go and win the SEC championship game next year, he's done, and he should be done. And I thought it was a good hire. Are they going to go back after Lane? I don't think so. I think Lane can make it work at Ole Miss, but just think about that, because we got two new guys and a third trying to find his way, and it's ugly in the state right now, and the sky is falling.
One last thought. I don't want to be labeled a conspiracy theorist, because that's not my point. I'm not thinking about playoffs or any of that stuff. All I'm saying is procedurally, maneuvers were made to improve perception of a really bad situation that I think their hand's been caught in the cookie jar.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.